Hey, you've already read the title of this video, so let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. If you hover over to the top left where this water logo is, you'll get an executive summary of all the production, consumption, storage, as well as balance for your whole column. As you can see, we have a production of 783, a consumption of 344, and a consumption of 360 for buildings. The difference between consumption in buildings is consumption is just for the colonist, and buildings are for stuff like cookhouses and toilets and stuff like that. Take your production and you minus the consumption as well as you minus the consumption in buildings, and you get your total balance, 79. So we have a balance of 79, which is good. Well, now it's 82, but that's a good place to be in. We always want to be in the positive. Then you also have storage and stored for buildings. Storage is different from stored in buildings because storage, just like consumption above, is used for colonists, and stored for buildings, well, it's used for buildings. Unlike energy, there's not like a water network. Once you place down a building, it immediately goes to storage, your buildings, or helps your water balance depending on how negative or positive. If you don't provide enough water to your colonists, then your colonists will die due to dehydration. And obviously that's a bad thing, as you want to make sure everyone is alive because colonists are a resource in this game as well. And for the record, I will not be going over all the different types of buildings that use water because that will be a whole nother beast. There are 9 different water buildings in the game. Most of them are locked behind a tech tree, but there are 3 buildings that you start out. And one of them is very overpowered. The first one is the water well. The second building is the water collector. And the third one is the clean water storage. Starting off with the water well, this building produces water by the amount of fertile soil that's underneath it. You can check fertile soil by clicking here, going to the fertile soil overlay. And depending on where you place this building, you'll get a certain amount of water production up to 12. So you can see up here, if we placed it here, we'd get 7, but we can't place it in barren soil because, as you can see in the top right, cannot be placed on barren soil. So depending on where you place it, the more fertile the soil, the better. So see, if we place it here, there's a 95% efficiency. We can get 11 water units. But if we place it in the more yellow part of the map, the efficiency starts going down, and the closer we get to barren soil, it actually drops even more because we're not getting as much fertile soil. So you want to place these in areas where there's a lot of fertile soil, so you get the highest efficiency possible. As you can see, I've already kind of taken over the spots that have really fertile soil because that's probably the best place to put them. But there are some spots that are still left over, like this yellow spot. We can get about 80% efficiency here if we place it, so we get 10 water units. We're only missing out on 2, so that's not bad. In my opinion, this building is absolutely overpowered. It's one of the strongest buildings in the game. It produces water with no labor requirements whatsoever. The only labor requirements needed for the water well is repairing it in case it gets hit by, a meteor, or if it's placed near pollution. In that case, you would have to decontaminate. As you can see, it's slowly getting contaminated, but it does not affect the water efficiency either if you place it near pollution. So that's also a really nice thing. The fact that it has no labor requirements for the building to produce water is outstanding, and it'll pretty much produce water until it's outright destroyed. The construction cost for this building is higher. As you can see here, it is higher than the water collector by a good amount. It's about it's more than double. But I find building the water well absolutely worth it because I save my costs and the labor force requirement. I'd rather spend the resources, the construction resources, as opposed to the labor requirement. And as you can see, you can build these all over the map. You can see where I've placed these, and they'll coincide with soil fertility. You can build these all over the map. As long as you have it discovered through the Fog of War, you can build it everywhere, and there's nothing... Usually they don't get attacked by hostile fauna either. Up next, we have the water collector, and this will produce roughly up to 14 water. It is less expensive on the construction cost side, but as you can see on this pop-up here, it has to be built on a shore, it's unusable during a fallout, and it must be heated during winter storms. It also requires a worker to gather water from a local pond or lake. In my opinion, those negatives are just not worth the one positive that it brings to the table, which is the construction requirement. I'd rather build water wells over a water collector all day, every day. The only time I could see this being useful is because I'm low on construction resources, or I'm struggling with land usage on higher difficulties, which is a very possible thing. Soil fertility on higher difficulties is actually pretty scarce, so these become more difficult to place around the map, Thus, a water collector comes into play. However, if I can, I would avoid building water collectors as they also take up shoreline space, which is something that perhaps a fishing hut or another shoreline building could be using. Up next, we have the clean water storage building, and it's exactly what it says it is. It stores clean water. You click on it, it stores 1600 water units. I build maybe 1 or 2 of these in my game, just for a bit of buffer for any catastrophes or disasters that might happen, but I'd rather not spend any more resources than that. If you're going to maintaining your water balance, you won't need much of these, but if you end up swinging your water balance a lot for whatever reason, you might want to build a few of these just to provide that little buffer that you can get, especially during a catastrophe like a heat wave. A heat wave is going to double your water consumption, so if we were to get a heat wave, we would need to basically produce a little bit over 1400, because both the consumption and consumption in buildings would double. But as soon as you hear that catastrophe being announced, you should be building stuff anyways. Up next, we have large clean water storage, which is actually behind the tech large drums right here in the infrastructure tab. This provides 1300 water units instead of the 1600 from the regular one. As you can see here, this is what the building looks like, and it provides 1300 water units compared to this one. In my opinion, I don't see why you'd use the science points to research this, especially when you can just build 2 of these and make sure your water balance is good and just go from there. But that's just my opinion. Maybe you want to build more of these. They do take up less space, so they do have a space saving aspect to it. Up next, we have the water tower, and you can see here the capacity is 500, and you can see the small blue radius around it. That is the effective radius of which this water tower can deliver water to buildings. This building is hidden behind the tech water pipes, which is the first technology. You need this building to deliver water to buildings like the cookhouse and toilets, as they have a water consumption cost. You see, they all have different water consumption costs. And so as long as the building that's consuming the water is placed within this effective radius, that water tower will provide water to those buildings. And as I said before, there is no water network like there is an energy network. So as long as your balance is positive, this capacity or storage will not go down, because it's all being derived from like a central water location, or however the game decides water is derived. You don't have to build pipes as well. Even though the technology is called water pipes, all it does is unlocks the water tower. So you don't need to build pipes. As long as the building is within the effective radius, you're good to go. Up next, we have large water tower, which is just a larger version of the regular water tower. It is locked behind the technology bigger barrels in the infrastructure tab. And this is what the large water tower looks like. It has 1200 instead of 500, and it also has a larger effective radius, as you can see here. This radius is much larger, so it is covering more area. If you had to decide between these two techs, arguably this one could be better because it is technically more efficient with its resources, as it provides more storage and a bigger radius, whereas this could be held off for later in the game. If a building does not have water being supplied to it, you'll see this yellow diamond / square that's spinning with a red outline on it. All you have to do is just build a water tower towards it. And you can see as you placed it, the water pipes are automatically built for you. As you can see, these blue lines that are connecting to it. And so the water pipes are technically already placed as soon as you place the building. As long as the consuming buildings are within range of the water tower building, the water tower will supply water to those buildings. We can see this building slowly being built, and as soon as it becomes 100%, these should disappear. And look at that, they did disappear. So now water is being supplied to these buildings, and as you can see, the capacity is going up because we have a high water balance. So this is filling up pretty quickly. Now that it's fully filled, the rest of the water is probably just thrown into void, or I'm not sure really what happens to it, but our balance is pretty much maxed out, so we can't store it, so it's probably thrown into the lakes and ponds nearby, if I had to assume. Funny enough, this building is not actually on the building list, as you can see here. This is the drilled well, which is the upgraded version of a water well. Drilled wells are locked behind the drilled wells technology in the infrastructure tab. The great thing about drilled wells is that once you upgrade them, they reach maximum efficiency. So they're always going to produce 16 water. So this one's only at 59% efficiency, producing 7 water. But if we were to upgrade it, even though it is not in a great spot for soil fertility, If we upgraded it, it would go immediately to 16%, but it must be away from other wells. So let's go ahead and upgrade it and see what happens to it. As you can see, the efficiency went to 100% and now we're producing 16 instead of the 7 water we were producing before. A sizable upgrade, indeed. Drilled wells are great because they have maximum efficiency already built into them. However, for the cost of another water well plus more metal, it's arguably better to just build more water wells than to upgrade to a drilled well. If you're running low on fertile soil, this is a great thing to build because it will jump to maximum 16 water production for not too many resources. However, for me, I would just still stick to building water wells unless the water production difference is more than what you'd be producing from a drilled well. Up next, we have bore wells. Bore wells are locked behind the tech Deep Drilling, which is about mid-game into the infrastructure tab. The great thing about bored wells is that they also produce the maximum 25 water units, regardless of where you place them on the map, and they can be placed next to other water-producing units. However, the downside to them is that they do require an energy consumption of 16 energy units. In addition to that, they do have a pretty hefty construction cost. As you can see here, it's taking components, parts, concrete, and metal, all of which are pretty expensive. And especially those components, you might not want to build this just yet, as components are a very big bottleneck in this game. This building is strong because you can place it anywhere on the map and it's going to build 25 water units regardless. It can also function in catastrophes as well. And lastly, we have water pump. This building is locked behind the tech submerged pumping in the infrastructure tab. Water pumps can produce up to 40 water units. They must be built on a shore, unusable during a fallout, and must be heated during winter storms. As you can see here, it is not functioning. It also has a pretty hefty construction cost, as you can see here, and it also consumes 7 energy units. These cannot be built next to each other, and they must be built further away from each other. Its efficiency is determined by how many water blocks are next to it. As you can see here, you can see the water droplet signs in front of it, but there's not too much behind it or in front of it. But if we were to say put it over here, we get a bit higher efficiency because it's covering more water in front of it and a little bit behind it. My personal thoughts on this, every game that I've played, I've won with mostly just water wells. They are simply just outstanding buildings, and it's a place and forget building that you could just put all over the map, and you could pretty much forget about it unless you need to repair it or decontaminate it. I rarely find myself building other water production buildings, but that could change on higher difficulty maps where soil fertility can become scarce. That's when water collectors might come into play, or drilled wells, or perhaps even a bore well. Aside from that, there's not much to water in this game. So what did you think? Did you learn something new? Let me know down in the comments below. If you liked this video, I'd greatly appreciate a like. If you want to see more content like this, I'd greatly appreciate a subscribe. And as always, have a good one. I'll see you soon.